we had ourselves a DJ mix just now. All right, welcome to New Vision Media. Let's talk. Men Show for men by men. I'm your host C4. As you know, on this platform, I try my best to bring you the relevant information that is necessary, all right, for your growth as men in this world. So tonight we're going to have a topic, all right, and if you have not heard about this as yet, then you must have had your head in the sand. All right, carbon credits, all right, carbon credits. So my guest this evening, and I will allow them to introduce themselves, we'll be having an in-depth conversation on what is carbon credits, because having conversations on Facebook, various WhatsApp groups, people still seem to be lost. All right, so we have the expert here himself, because if you have not heard about this individual, like I said, I don't know what's been going on with you. All right, but he's been making the rounds. All right, so he's here on Let's Talk with us. He's here with the guest this evening, and I allow them to introduce themselves. All right, our first guest.
Yes. Good evening, Bahamas. Pedro Johnson here.
What do you do, Mr. Johnson?
I'm actually in sales and marketing, working for a major company here in Nassau.
All right, awesome.
Ricardo Thurston, investment analyst. Good afternoon, Bahamas.
All right. So, as I said, our topic this evening is going to be carbon credits. All right. For those of you who do not know what has been going on with the carbon credits, we will have a few of these shows. It won't just be one, because we want to go in depth. We want to take it down to the layman's view of what is carbon credits, why is it so important, what happened to them, and how do we turn that all around. But as I said, it will be different segments. So for this particular segment, we're going to deal with what are carbon credits. So, Mr. Thurston, could you please educate us?
This is a very important topic for Bahamians to really get into at this particular juncture of our development, because this industry can mean for every single Bahamian $50,000 annually in your pocket.
Hold on now. So you got to pump the brakes, because when you start talking about money, the Bahamian people have to be interested in that. All right. So you're saying to me that carbon credits can give each Bahamian citizen $50,000 a year.
Yes, minimum.
Minimum. Okay, if y'all don't know what minimum means, right, that's like the least you could get. That's on the low end, okay? For those who don't understand that, so hey, you're talking some big things right now. How many of y'all working 40 hours a day, 5-6 days a week, and can't make 40 grand in a year, much less 50? Come on, man. Let's get into this.
Let's unpack the whole thing about carbon credits. Let's start at the origin of the system. Carbon credits is based on a system, and it has to do with climate change. So when you hear the conversation about climate change and carbon credits, they're closely linked.
Okay.
You can't have one without the other.
Yeah, okay, all right.
Parts of the solution that are provided for climate change has to do with carbon credits.
Okay.
But let's start at the beginning, so we can have a complete understanding about carbon credits and the entire system. It started in the 80s in the US.
Okay.
They were using coal as the primary source for generating electricity. But as a result of using coal to generate that electricity, they put sulfur dioxide into the air. And that sulfur dioxide returned to the Earth's surface as acid rain. And that acid rain was very, very destructive. So the United States government at the time came up with a system. They experimented with a system called cap and trade. And how the system works is this. All of the power generation companies were given permits, which allow them to produce at a certain level. And so they just gave them permits and say, hey, you can pollute. You can pollute. You can pollute up to a certain level. And once you exceed that level, you will incur a penalty.
Okay.
Now,
And this that you're talking about, they instituted this from 1980, from in the 80s.
in the 80s,
Okay, all right. You have permission to pollute to a certain level from
a
the
certain
80s.
level.
Okay.
Now, obviously, when you had those companies, the whole idea was to get those companies to transition into a new source for generating electricity.
That was to encourage them.
Yes.
Okay, all right.
And have more of a phase-in approach.
Did that work?
Well, we can get to that. We're going to get to that. But what ended up happening was that you had companies that went over their pollution allowance, and you had companies that came in under that pollution allowance. The ones who came in under, they established a credit. And the ones who went over, they established a penalty. But the ones who came under were able to sell those credits to the ones who went over the gap.
Okay.
Therein lies the system cap and trade. Now, you asked the question, was that cap and trade system successful?
Yes.
It was very successful because in 8 years, the United States was able to reduce the amount of sulfur dioxide in the atmosphere by 20%. During the 1990s, 1992, the UN established what they call the UNFCCC, a division of the UN that deals with climate change. The UNFCCC stands for the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. During the initial stages of setting up the UNFCCC, it was just research oriented. So they were engaged in research to determine the effects of human behavior on various ecosystems. Fast forward to 1997, you had the Kyoto Protocols, which required companies to implement certain things to combat climate change. You have the Paris Agreements that came into force in 2016 that supersedes the Kyoto Protocols. That is more about enforcement of the various treaties that the major industrialized countries have signed on in order to reduce climate emissions over a certain time. So that's where we are in terms of that whole system. The UN instituted this cap and trade system and they applied it to countries. So they put a pollution limit allowance on a particular country. And if that country exceeds that limit, they would have to pay penalties, or they can
Purchase credits
from somebody
from somebody else.
who falls under the permissible allowance.
Okay, so well, do you know how they determine the level of pollution that is tolerable?
Well, the whole idea is that they're trying to meet goals. They put forth certain goals. And the goal is to reduce the amount of emissions in the atmosphere, to reduce the temperature to 2 degrees above pre-industrial levels.
Okay.
So that's the mandate. They're trying to reach that goal, and they set a time frame for meeting that goal.
All right.
Now, based on just how things have been going, those deadlines and those goals that they put forward, they're not going to meet those goals.
Wow.
And those not being able to meet those goals will have a dramatic effect on climate change. Now, Bahamians might look at it and say, oh, climate change, whatever, they all about talking about this ain't have nothing to do with me.
Right.
But that hurricane that just came to the Bahamas, Dorian, climate change affected the velocity of that hurricane. We have always had natural disasters, but climate change affects the frequency and the severity of those hurricanes and natural disasters. So you'll have a hurricane becoming more severe because there's more heat in the atmosphere and it can generate more energy from the sea. And as a result, its impact is more severe. That's a direct correlation back to climate change.
The question here then, because you're speaking about the hurricane and the pollution and what causes it, how does us selling them our clean air, this is basically what it is, okay? Because we wouldn't have as many emissions as them. So that's how we accrue our credits. How does us selling our credits to them change the veracity that could be coming forth with the hurricane? Because if they're still doing what they're doing, wouldn't it still be happening?
Well, when we go back to how the cap and trade system was initially configured, you have a proof of concept. It worked in terms of reducing the amount of sulfur dioxide being placed into the atmosphere. The whole idea now, in terms of reducing the amount of greenhouse emissions that's being put in the atmosphere, is that you want to transition the world of energy sources that create pollution and transition them into what they call renewables. The idea is you can't just shut off those sources that are producing energy, because that would have an overall impact to these countries' economies.
Right.
So they just can't shut it down.
No.
They have to phase in whatever.
Right. Replace it with something better.
Else.
Yes.
So the whole idea is you're giving a runway to these companies to phase in a new type of technology or a new type of energy system.
So the bottom line is, us giving them the credits or them buying the credits is not going to stop what it is that they're doing. But they are mandated
Yes.
to replace those things, so gradually they don't have a choice.
They don't have a choice.
They're going to have to get rid of these things that are causing all the problems,
Yes.
and put in something that's going to be better.
Yes. And you've heard out there in the public domain an argument about the cap and trade system, that it doesn't do what it set out to do in terms of having companies reduce the amount of pollutions that they're putting into the atmosphere.
So is that true or no?
Well, it's true to a certain extent, because the UN hasn't been able to enforce some of the mandates that they've put on some of these countries.
Why not?
Well, there is a decision-making body of the UN that comes out of the UNFCCC that is called the Conference of the Parties. So you might have heard the Prime Minister flying off to go to what they call COP27, COP26.
Yes, I heard.
They have COP28.
Yeah.
This is where they have a meeting of the minds, where the decision makers from various countries sit in a room, and they decide how they're going to meet those mandates and those treaties that they've signed on to in that Paris Agreement. So you have a lot of the industrialized countries trying to buy more time.
Okay.
And that's all it is.
All right. All right. I got you. So basically, even though these things are there, they're mandated and they're mandatory. You get grace. If you ask right, if you ask correctly, if you ask politely, you get some grace.
Yeah.
And these people basically just been asking for grace, and that is the reason why these things haven't been enforced as yet.
But because of the effects of climate change, we are quickly moving into a point of no return. So the push for having real climate change policies actually being enforced, because that Paris Agreement is the enforcement phase of the protocols. Because they had a phase where it was research, they had a phase where they allowed countries to implement certain aspects of those UN conventions, but now we are in the enforcement phase, where countries now need to enforce those mandates and reduce, and they're putting a lot of pressure on countries to reduce the amount of carbon that they're putting into the atmosphere. And all countries in the world are on board with this, because every single country in the world has been affected in the last 10 years with these disasters. And if you look at, let's just look at what happened in New York with that flooding. I think it was Thursday and Friday.
Just recently, yeah.
The damage that that flood did in New York City. They're throwing around numbers in the $100 billion range in terms of the damage.
Wow.
So you're looking at an event, you're looking at climate events that can wipe out $100 billion worth of assets in a matter of 2 days. So, I mean, we at that point.
It would be in the best interest of everybody to try to
So,
avoid these things.
Because when you talk about climate change, you're really talking about something that affects everybody. All countries are affected by this. Today it's you, tomorrow is me. And so the world is on board with actually saving the planet, because that's where we are. I don't mean to sound like an alarmist.
Listen.
But that's where we are.
Listen, if an alarm needs to be sounded, then someone needs to sound it.
Yeah.
Okay, it's just as simple as that. Okay, if people are going to take offense to accurate information being disseminated to them, then that's their problem.
Yeah, but
Okay, but you're saying that we are there.
yeah, we are there.
Okay, so they need to understand.
Yeah.
They need to understand. Everyone had to get on board on to deal with this particular situation. And we are where we are because we are not an industrial country. All right? But it will affect us. It does affect us. It has affected us,
Yes.
as you mentioned, Dorian.
Yes.
Okay?
So the policies that a lot of countries are now putting in place, like if you go to a lot of the European countries, they institute what they call a carbon tax on households as a way of mitigating some of the cost. Because if that country is going to be penalized, they have to find a way to pay those
And
penalties.
it's always the people who suffer. Always.
Yes.
Always the people who
Yes.
suffer.
But in addition to that, you have countries and companies that can go into a country and they can source carbon credits to offset whatever they are over the cap on. They call those carbon offsets. So the scientists have just discovered over the last 5 years that blue carbon credits, which are marine vegetation,
Okay.
they extract 3 times the amount of carbon out of the atmosphere than what you call green carbon credits, just planting a tree.
Right.
So the Bahamas, in terms of having marine vegetation, the value of the marine vegetation, which is the seagrass beds, in the Caribbean, is about $255 billion.
Notice he said billion. Like no, he didn't. Yeah, that wasn't like a miss. Yeah, he didn't misspeak just now. He used the B and not an M.
And 61% of that valuation is in the Bahamas.
61% of the entire Caribbean
Yes.
Blue-
Marine carbon credit
blue marine carbon credits
is in the Bahamas.
is in the Bahamas.
Wow.
And it's valued at $156 billion.
Yeah, we've heard these numbers thrown around.
They're not thrown around.
No,
They
no, no.
are a result of a research report that was done by the University of Michigan.
The reason why I'm saying that is because the Bahamian people assume that they're just hearing these things being thrown around, especially when certain things are being said, and then you see some people come on the news or the newspaper and speak it and saying, these things are not correct. What you're saying is this is something that can be validated, and where can they go and find that information?
Well, the Tribune printed an article on the 22nd of June referring to that University of Michigan research report.
And Mr. Johnson? wanted to say? Well, take it.
Well, I actually did it myself after I heard that information, and you can go right on Google and Google the information, and it's right there. I couldn't believe it when I saw it. So if you're out there listening, just go ahead and Google University, Michigan University, and / seabed or seagrass, and see what comes up.
And so the Bahamas is now in smack dab in the center of one of the most lucrative industries going forward, which is projected by 2030 to be valued in the range of $14 trillion.
That's 61% or the entire industry?
The entire industry is projected to be valued at about $14 trillion
and we got
by 2030.
And we got 61%
of what's in the Caribbean.
Of what's in the Caribbean.
Wow.
Now, what's important to recognize about the cap and trade system, every year, the amount of pollution allowance that a country or a company gets is reduced.
Wow.
Now, what's important to recognize about the cap and trade system, every year, the amount of pollution allowance that a country or a company gets is reduced. So if they put in the same amount of pollutants into the atmosphere, they would need to purchase more carbon offsets. What I'm actually saying to you is that over time, the value of the carbon credits would only go up in value because there'll be more demand placed on those carbon credits.
All right.
So that's where we are in terms of the potential for the Bahamas. This isn't what some people were referring to as pie in the sky. It never gets more real than what it is right now.
Gotcha. Wow.
And it's so real that the government has passed 2 acts,
That's correct.
not 1, 2, to deal with carbon credits. That's where we are. Now, the understanding of carbon credits is you have to do research on the cap and trade system to really understand how that works. And then you have cap and trade systems in major industrialized countries. And then these arrangements, these cap and trade arrangements, they're legally binding. Those agreements that are entered to under the UN treaties, they're legally binding. They're not something that you can get out of.
Gotcha.
So the money is real because the system is real.
Gotcha. Wow. No, but I appreciate him speaking to it in that way, because a lot of people feel as if, you have things that are imaginary, right? But as long as the system is real, the money is real. Just as there are some people out there who still don't believe in cryptocurrency.
Yeah.
But the system is real. So the money is real because money is being traded.
You mentioned, Mr. Thurston, that there were 2 acts that were already passed. And what exactly were those acts that were passed in reference to?
Well, the government passed the Climate Change and Carbon Market Initiative Act. That would have been passed on May the 20th, 2022. And then they followed up with the National Investment Fund Act.
What were the purposes of these acts? I mean, because that should be part B.
Well, well, the first act, the Climate Change and Carbon Market Initiative Act, essentially gave the Prime Minister carte blanche power, autonomy in terms of decision-making over how those carbon credits are to be managed. He has total oversight and corporate governance. Well, it's not only the Prime Minister, it's the Prime Minister and the Minister of Finance.
But the Prime Minister and the Minister of Finance is the same people.
One and the same.
That's the same person. I mean, in our country, I can't speak for nobody's else.
It is.
It is.
Okay, so it's one person.
It's one person.
Who they say it is 2 people.
It's 2 positions. One person.
Yeah, but I'm saying, but on paper, it would come across as if it's two different people.
Yes.
But it's-
Yeah.
or two different
It's
officers.
two officers.
But two
One
different
person
officers. But it's
holding both officers.
right, one person holding both officers. Are you aware of any other country that this type of situation?
I can't tell you that I've ever heard anything like that. Because if you're running a business, right?
So weird.
And
I see, but
let me put it like this.
He's another host. He's a John
no, but
Our
it's
country
like,
has created a scenario
Uh-uh.
that is really laughable.
Yeah.
I found it funny.
It's only
Bahamas is a damn
laughable
jokey
if the
country
amount of
already.
money that we're talking about
Wasn't so
serious.
big, yeah,
Yes.
because that's like, oh my, like, wow, how did you allow me to allow this?
Wow. Now, we've created a scenario, not us, but the Parliament of the Bahamas has created a scenario where the Prime Minister and the Minister of Finance have to have a meeting to determine what they're going to do with these carbon credits.
So he could bed off in the shower and talk to himself.
Yeah.
But
A meeting was held.
I guess so, but
that's basically what you said, because who confirmed this meeting? Who recorded this meeting?
Where's the minutes?
and what you gonna do? Talk to yourself?
This is what I'm saying. I mean, so I could be bed, he could be bed off in the shower, and I would go, you know what? Wait today, I think I'm gonna transfer.
Wow.
You know, come on.
And we're talking about, you have a system like that set up, and you're talking about assets valuing $156 billion that belongs
To the Bahamian people.
to the Bahamian people. That's how serious it is.
Your
It's
neighbor
laughable in one sense, if it wasn't so
belongs
serious.
to the
I'm trying to figure out why
Bahamian
there hasn't been any rioting in the streets. I have to assume that people
Me
just don't understand
and
what is
you.
going on.
Blinders.
Are we this politically indoctrinated, this politically
No,
corrupt?
I
Or we
think-
just this ignorant?
We are ignorant at this stage. And ignorance isn't a bad word. It
No,
just means that
people don't understand that. That just simply, I'm not, no one's saying
don't
you're
know.
stupid. Just saying you do not know.
You don't
You
know.
do not know. You
That's
just
it.
don't know.
Yeah, you don't know. All of us are ignorant at a particular time in our life. We don't know. I'm ignorant about some things.
I still ignorant about some
Yeah.
things.
So, but I think we are at that stage where there's a lot of ignorance and there's a lot of misinformation. And I think some of the misinformation is intentional.
I don't think. I know. But anyhow, continue.
Yeah. So the campaign to educate
It's what's
Bahamians
necessary.
is what's necessary
Gotcha.
at this particular
All right.
juncture.
And this is the reason why you're trying to get on as many platforms as possible to make sure that the Bahamian people are educated as to what's taking place.
But not only that, I think that's only one phase. I think there has to be an action phase, a phase where you move into, where you can galvanize people. And you're trying to make a change, actually have those acts repealed and replaced with something else that is more beneficial for Bahamians.
So that the Bahamians can actually get this $50,000 a year, because with this act that's taking place, there's nothing mentioned in the act about the $50,000, right?
Well, the second act that the government has passed,
Uh-huh.
called the National Investment Fund Act, that act actually repealed the Sovereign Wealth Fund Act.
Because with the Sovereign Wealth Fund Act, they would have had to put this money into the Sovereign Wealth Fund and distribute it to
Well-
Bahamians?
Well, let's back up a bit.
Yeah.
When you talk about the carbon credit markets, there are two markets. One is compliant and one is non-compliant. There is the voluntary market, which is non-compliant, meaning that you can go into that market and engage, and there are not any rules, there are not any guardrails in place. The other market is the mandatory market, which is governed by the UN, and that has compliance and regulations in place. Our government has elected to go into the voluntary side of the market, where there's no compliance.
Crooks.
The compliance that the government would have had to adhere to, some of those UN protocols, because the UN recognized the assets, the natural resources, as assets belonging to the people.
Okay.
And a part of that patrimony means that there has to be direct funding from the proceeds of that natural resources going to the citizens of that country.
So this was a deliberate act.
Yes.
Because all of this would have been explained to them, just as you explained it to me.
Yeah,
It would have been explained to them, and they're like, "Oh, we don't help them, so we can take this one."
that's
Yeah.
the measure they took.
And what is so alarming about that? Because this gets a bit even more, I mean, to choose my words, but at this point, it gets more deceptive. Because if you go and you look at the price for carbon credits in the voluntary market, they're priced at $6 to $8. When you go on the mandatory side of the market, they're priced at between $80 and $90.
Okay, hold on. Let's pause. Let's pause right now. So what you're saying to me is that I have a choice to get a job that's going to pay me either $15,000 a year or $500,000 a year, and I decide to take the job and give me $15,000 a year.
Yeah.
I try to figure out who that makes sense to,
It makes sense to them.
because that money going in their pocket instead of coming to the people. So they prefer to lose and steal than win and benefit the people.
But let's give them a bit more credit,
Okay.
right? There's a thing in the financial world called arbitrage, right? Arbitrage is essentially when you have a particular product, but in one market, it's traded for $10, and in another market, it's traded for $100. What the government is attempting to do is create arbitrage. They're gonna set up a company, sell the carbon credits to themselves, and turn around and sell it into the mandatory market.
Now, hold on, man. Okay. Hold on now. So at the end of the day, yes. They buy low, they sell high,
Crooks
and keep the money.
Yep.
These motherfuckers the thief,
At no point does it benefit the payment people.
No point.
Because nothing in your conversation sound like it helped me.
And further to that, whatever proceeds comes in from those carbon credits. Now I'm explaining to you how the act is structured. This isn't me making up stuff. This is their stuff.
This
that
is
they
the
put
actual.
together.
Right.
So and you all can go and look up these acts and read them thoroughly.
Yes.
Please.
Yep.
So they've instituted an act, the National Investment Fund, and essentially they repealed the Sovereign Wealth Fund. So what does that mean? That means that hey, they have no intentions of giving Bahamian people monies. You're not going to get a Sovereign Wealth Fund check because there's no Sovereign Wealth Fund.
Right.
Right? And they've instituted this National Development Plan, which functions as a slush fund. We all know what a slush fund
Yes.
is, right?
Well, for those who don't,
please
break it
explain.
down. Yes, for those who don't,
Well,
please break it down.
A slush fund is something that doesn't really have a designation. You just put it in a pot over there. You just take money out at your leisure and say, I can use it for this, that, and that.
Right.
And there's no real
No accountability.
guidelines, oversight, and
There's
corporate
no
governance
there's
in
no
place
accountability.
as to how
There's no accountability.
Take it
how
in
you
your name.
use those funds. So they have essentially set up a slush fund.
By damn.
And also in that act, the Prime Minister, I have to say the Prime Minister because, well, he's higher than the Minister of Finance, and he happens to be both.
Right.
So it's just the Prime Minister.
Yes.
He's in the act, he set up what they call this orange economy, and this brown economy. The orange economy deals with sports and culture, and they provide funding for things like media, the arts, and all of that. And essentially, what I'm saying to you is that he set up a vehicle where he can go in and engage in funding where he can actually bribe people Because he could go into the Junkanoo groups
Mhm.
and he could say, hey, I could provide funding up to, I could give each of you all $1 million. And in exchange for that, you know, you got to roll with me.
But I mean, no, but see, the thing about it is that's how business is done straight across the board all around the world. Because every loan that every country gets, inclusive of us, there has to be, there are stipulations. There are
Agreed.
conditions that go with that.
Agreed.
And so what he's doing is he's making himself IMF. He's the Bahamian IMF.
Yes. Yes. No, he's making himself king. Everything comes through me.
Right.
I'm making all of the decisions. I have all the money. I determine who gets it. If I don't like you, you don't get none.
Right.
So you have this hoarding of power now because it's more than just the money. He set up a vehicle where he becomes that authority.
What happens when he's no longer prime minister?
Well, whoever occupies that
Whoever occupies
will
the seat.
inherit the power that the prime minister has right now.
Wow. So whoever's in the seat, their goal will probably be to hoard as much as they can during their time, and then hey, you can come get some
And
of this
that
after.
is why you hear very little uproar about what's taking place.
Because the parties,
opposition.
because the parties will benefit regardless. Because yeah, y'all eating now, but we can get out 156 billion in the next term.
Yes.
And
Well,
we all will be rich.
it's not 156 billion. It's 156 billion every year.
It's annual.
Hold on now.
It's not a one-time.
Hold on now, people.
It's not a one-time deal.
Hold on now, people. Understand this. With 156 billion, right? We only get so much seats in Parliament, right? So everybody could get a private jet, yacht, big time spread on any part of the Bahamian Islands or Caribbean or even freaking Africa if they want to, okay? And there's a year, and these suckers in for 5 years. Phil, hold on, man. Hold on. Come on, man. Listen. Pay attention, you know. Pay attention because something needs to be done.
Now, they've started with an initial tranche of carbon credits because what they did was the total area that you're talking about with seagrass beds, it's 92,000 kilometers, which is about 35,521.399 square miles of seagrass beds. What they've done is they've decided to take it in blocks of 5,000 square miles. And the first tranche load of that, if you go to the voluntary side of the market, it's worth up $800 and so odd million.
$1 million. Right?
And if you go to the mandatory side of the market, it's worth about $9 billion. They've elected to go to the voluntary side of the
right?
market.
Mm-hmm.
So they're gonna have that money is coming in by the end of this year. The first tranche load will be.
So these people will have a merry, merry, merry Christmas.
My Lord.
Because the Bahamian people ain't getting none of this.
No.
Well, motherfucker.
And what's
Boy, look
so
here.
disconcerting about what's going on is that there's no reporting requirements to the Parliament of the Bahamas.
Or to the people of the Bahamas. Because we out that car.
Yeah, we out that. So he's essentially, if you go through the two acts, especially the National Investment Fund Act, he set up firewalls in that act. And he's also instituted penalties in that act for people who this information comes within their remit. Like if you are a part of any of those committees or any person where this information comes into your remit, if you disclose any information regarding these carbon credits and what is being done with these carbon credits, you're penalized $100,000 and or you could spend 5 years in prison.
No, I don't know nobody who would be looking to take that. So all mouths could be shut here. Mr. Johnson, how do you feel on
Mr. Johnson, Mr. Johnson, would you read, if we can find,
Let's,
I think that's 26?
yeah, let's verify that here.
And you're reading from?
I'm reading from, this is the official Gazette that was passed and dated the 30th of December, 2022. This is the
Why
National
people have a
Investment
junk on
Act
doing
of
bullshit?
2022.
They friggin'
We go down into
robbing the treasury.
section,
That's why the
and I would
man, that's
read
why
here,
Brave opened up the
4,
country.
a
To see
member
then how
or
he plans
person
on how he
referred to
thief
in
everything
this
from the
section
people.
who, 1,
And everybody
fails to do anything required by the
down
section,
Bay Street like a
or
bunch of
B,
damn sheets.
unlawfully
whining and shaking up
discloses
while
any
Brave them
document or information pertaining to the operation or
gone with the whole
management
friggin'
of a
treasury.
fund, or uses such document or information for this personal benefit or advantage, commits an offense, and is liable on conviction to a fine of $100,000 or to imprisonment for a term of 5 years or to both such fine and imprisonment.
I was
Ladies and
wondering
gentlemen,
where the both was coming in, but wow. Either or is bad enough, but you could get all two. Wow.
Both.
So it all depends on how pissed off they are at you.
Yeah, so they've totally insulated themselves in terms of securing a framework for those carbon credits and being able to insulate themselves from any of that information coming out. That's where we are.
Wow.
And this act, the National Investment Fund Act, that was passed on the 30th of December, 2022.
While everybody.
New Year's Eve.
Yep.
While you all was out partying,
Yeah.
they was in the house securing the money.
And that's normally how it works.
And at the same time, 2016, the
Sovereign Wealth Fund Act.
Sovereign Wealth Fund Act was tabled and repealed.
Yeah. So they repealed that act, that Sovereign Wealth Fund Act, at the same time. Because this act repeals the Sovereign Wealth Fund Act. And you can see it in the heading. I mean,
in the heading it says it.
you can read it in the heading. You gotta go. We just want Mr. Phillips to verify from the act so he can read it for himself.
Oh, wow.
The heading says.
Okay, so number 41 of 2022, National Investment Funds Act 2022, an act to repeal and replace the Sovereign Wealth Fund Act 2016 and to provide for the establishment of a national investment fund for a purpose specified in the act. So yes, this clearly says this in the freaking heading. Wow. I mean, they let you know from the jump. We don't want you to be confused. This right here lets you know you will no longer have a sovereign wealth fund. Wow.
And I can actually play an insert where the Prime Minister and the leader of the opposition was having an exchange. And the Prime Minister commented that eventually we may have a sovereign wealth fund. You seem to be very confused.
Yeah, yeah, man. I can need you to break that down right there, my brother.
So he's saying that eventually we may have a sovereign wealth fund, but he's just repealed the sovereign wealth fund.
So that
doesn't make sense.
No, that's why I'm confused.
No, but what I think
The man is a
they're
damn
engaging
liar.
in the only thing that I can call it is a massive fraud,
Yeah,
a
massive
theft
fraud.
of the century
Yes.
being perpetrated on the
in
Bahamian
the
people.
people. Yes.
And we sitting back and allowing this to happen. And see, you know, one of the things that pisses me off as it relates to politicking, all of this money that's being stolen, they wouldn't put anything toward the debts. So you have $156 billion.
And you have a $13 billion debt.
You trying to tell me
Right.
you want me to pay the money with your teeth?
Yeah.
And then you can't go teeth more money?
Yeah. I
And then
understand
you
the
taking out of that
money.
money with your teeth to pay?
Yeah.
Come on.
No, but you have to understand, you need to understand control. See, it's a difficult thing for you to fathom because if you understand how the mind of somebody, how sadistic your mind have to be to want to control a person, and thereby, if you control those citizens, you control the country.
Mm-hmm.
You have to have a sadistic mind.
Uh,
So-
and
so-
these people are groomed into, this level.
So you would start off with a process of putting burdens on people, onerous burdens, that they're so trapped in that everyday rat race,
Mm-hmm.
they don't have time to actually consider these things.
Yeah.
Because it's all about, hey, how do I pay the next bill? How do I? They can't
BPL
even-
3 times what it used to be.
Yes.
You understand what I'm saying? You go into to the gas pump, and even when gas is going down, the prices on the pump is going up.
So all of this is a part of the plan. Because if I start to spend money, you would think I'm rich.
Mm-hmm.
As a country, as a person,
Yes.
people start to pay attention. Hey,
Yes.
where this money coming from?
Right.
So you fixing all the roads, all the schools up and running, the hospital is this and that. You be like, hey, we got money.
Yep. I can need some of that.
Hey, you need some of that.
I can need some raises here.
Yeah.
We've been waiting on these raises in
But-
increments for years.
but that-
where's mine?
But that might erode my power.
Mm-hmm. No, not might will, because the thing about it is, if a person is free or feels free, right? They're not really gonna listen to too much what you have to say, because I good. You understand what I'm saying? If it was truly about the Bahamian people, one, the level of stealing that's been taking place over the past 50 years wouldn't have been happening.
Correct.
All right, that's just automatic. If it was ever about the Bahamian people, you would have made sure that there was some controls on that. Freedom of Information Act
Correct.
would have been passed a
don't
long
have
time
that.
ago. We don't have these things to make sure that we can't see what they do. No how.
But this one is different though.
No.
This is a
This on a totally different level. I say that, no, this is on a totally and completely different
Because-
level.
But let me just inject there, just to show you how the level this is on, to where we have two acts that was passed in the House. And where is the voice of the opposition? Where's the voice of any Bahamian in there who would say, hold on now,
This ain't making no
this is for the Bahamian people. Why are we doing this?
Yeah.
Did we have that?
No.
No. Quiet. Did we hear from anyone? Quiet. And they were all passed. And now we have here a copy of the two acts, the gazetted. So any Bahamian now can go and get this information.
It's too late though. It's already passed. Well, I wouldn't say too late. There's things that can
Yes,
be done, but it's
things-
going to
things can
be
done in the field. Yeah,
yes, it's
absolutely.
going-
Yeah,
But they're already in act.
There are things that can be done, but it requires a level of engagement from the Bahamian people,
Exactly.
and it has to be a collective force, speaking with one voice, in order for us to have these two acts repealed and have acts instituted that are properly structured, where you have proper oversight, corporate governance, and you have a mechanism where the Bahamian people will know the amount of carbon credits that you're talking about and how you intend to sell them. And to have the proceeds, the amounts, verified. We need a mechanism for that so you can have proper oversight.
But this is
So-
this is the reason why education is so important, and that's why you have to start with that, because they're not going to do anything if they don't understand why it needs to be done. So your goal, your job, the task that you have taken upon yourself, because it ain't like no one paying you to make sure that this is getting done. You've taken this challenge and this burden on yourself to make sure that the Bahamian people are fully aware as to what is going on, so that when it's time to charge, they know why and they know where they need to be.
Yeah, we need to organize and we need to build out an army.
Hear that?
So when we go, be prepared for war,
Mm-hmm.
because that's what it is. They've initiated war on the Bahamian people,
Mm-hmm.
and they decided that they want to enslave your children,
And your children's children.
your children's
That's
children.
correct.
Now, if you don't believe that's war, they have engaged in war. And it's a perpetual war where they've taken a certain group of people, whatever they want to call themselves, elitists or whatever, how they characterize themselves. And they've decided that we different from y'all.
We better than
And
you are.
we better than y'all. And we've decided that the patrimony of the Bahamian people, that belongs to us and not you. Even though you are a Bahamian citizen just like they are.
You don't deserve none of
There's
this.
something different about them
Yeah.
that entitles them to do what they're doing, and you sit in your corner and don't say anything. And maybe I could give you a job
Yeah.
on one of my house or my Airbnb as a maid or whatever. And
You could cut my lawn.
Yeah.
Actually, they ain't even really trying to give you them type of jobs because
No.
they important to Filipinos
Yeah, so-
under Latin American people for the house situation. They're making sure that the Haitians and Jamaicans, those dealing with the landscaping situation, because they ain't prepared to pay Bahamians fair wages for their stuff. So they trying to cut you out all kinds of ways.
All kinds of ways.
This is the reason why things are so open with immigration. Because at the end of the day, we want to make sure we're smarter than y'all.
And we've moved to a point in the country where if Bahamians aren't able to galvanize, and it reminds me a lot of the 60s when you had the Burma Road riot.
Mhm.
And to show you how governments in this country think, you can't point me to a street in the Bahamas called Burma Road.
Mm.
But yet still, one of the most profound historical events took place on Burma Road. But you can't find a street
It
named
ain't
Burma
Burma
Road
Road.
nowhere in the Bahamas.
Now, that's profound.
Mm.
I actually never
To
even
show
thought about
you,
that.
to show you how distorted,
Interesting.
how these people try to miseducate you.
Mm-hmm.
But it reminds me of the 60s when Bahamians had to come together and speak with one voice. That fight that they engaged in was about political independence. Now we find ourselves, a new generation,
Mm-hmm.
engaged in a similar battle, but it's for economic
Economic
independence.
independence.
And we have to be prepared to have the level of engagement and the level of sacrifice that our forefathers had in the 60s.
And I agree.
Correct.
I agree.
with that.
I agree.
And now more than ever, the Bahamians need to come together. Because if we allow what's about to take place, this country would be unbearable for Bahamians going forward. And I hate to be an alarmist like that, but it's that real because you're looking at the early stages of what Haiti used to be before it descended into the utter chaos that it is now. Because you will create a situation in the country where you have the extremely wealthy and the working class. And when it's a simple formula, you know. If you throw food over the fence and you have 12 dogs, you have them separated. You have 2 dogs over here, and you have 12 dogs over here. And you take 90% of the food
And give it to the
and
two dogs.
give it to the 2 dogs. And you take the 10% and throw it over the fence for those 12 dogs.
They have to fight for that.
They have to fight.
They have to fight for that.
So when you create these situations in a society where you have that disparity of wealth, you know what the outcome is going to be
Yes, of course. I mean,
because
okay,
it's about survival.
we weren't raised under the principle of Ubuntu. So we don't know what it is to take care of each other.
No.
We don't want, we've lost the village mentality.
That's
We've lost the
correct.
community mentality. So you have people living through corners who don't even know each other.
That's right.
And even if they do, they don't speak. So you trying to say to me that they all us hungry?
Yeah.
And you, no man, that could be a big fight.
But it's ignorance as well, because us as Bahamians, right? This affects all of us. So if you come out and support anything to galvanize around the issues of sovereign wealth fund carbon credits, you coming out to fight for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
So even if you're a selfish person,
Yes. Take care of you.
Yeah.
If you have a child,
So,
you can't be so selfish you don't care about your child.
Correct.
Take care of you, take care of your child.
so even for selfish reasons,
Mm-hmm.
because a lot of us, we are selfish people.
Yes, yes.
Some of us are selfless,
Mm-hmm.
but most of us are
Not
selfish.
selfish, yes.
So whatever motivates you is still one cause.
Yes.
If you're selfish and you want to come out for your money,
Yeah.
it's still one cause.
Still one cause.
If you're selfless and you're thinking about a bigger cause, it's still the same cause.
Still the same cause.
But we are all united in a battle. Whether we realize it or not, it's us against them.
Exactly.
And they've drawn the battle lines. And we have been yet to engage at a very serious level. The level of engagement in terms of calling these people out on the carpet and saying, hey, I know what you did.
And the
It's
reason
time
why,
to answer.
the reason why we haven't is because we aren't standing with one voice. One or two people saying something doesn't mean anything. You could be removed, you know. But 10,000,
10,000.
20,000.
Yes. Those are the type of numbers that we need.
People, you all
I'm
hear that?
prepared to be the voice,
You all hear this?
but I'm only one person.
10,
But-
20,000.
If 20,000 agree that I speak for them, then I represent them with whatever utters out of my mouth is a representation about how they feel. Now that echoes loudly, not only in the Bahamas, but across the Caribbean, and it resonates in the international community.
Yes.
So we need to start to galvanize in terms of how we can be activists. Rather than saying, hey, they did this to us. Yeah, we recognize what they attempting to
Bahamians
do.
need to down protest.
But how are we gonna fight
Every
against
time
that?
they have a house
What
meeting,
people need to understand in
Bahamian
reference to
ass need to
activism,
be out
because a
there
lot of
making
people, when they
noise.
think about activists, they're thinking about Huey Newton, you know, thinking about Malcolm X and Martin Luther King, and thinking about shots and all these different things. You can play a part in so many different ways, all right? You're going to be out there and you're making sure that people get the water, that they get the food.
Yeah.
You understand what I'm saying? Okay, you're providing the music, you're providing entertainment, but you're here,
You know.
all right?
Correct.
You have your soldiers, because in the army, everybody ain't a soldier.
No.
That's right.
Okay, we got people in the kitchen.
Yeah.
All right, we got
Yeah,
doctors, we got
administrative
we got to mention. Okay, so that means that whatever role you want to play, you can come and you can play that. And the good thing, what the brother's speaking about, he's not saying you got to go pick up some illegal tools and start shooting
No,
some people
no,
up.
no,
He ain't
no,
saying that at all.
no,
He is not saying that at all.
no.
He's just saying stand up.
Yes.
Stand up.
Stop sitting down, get up off your knees.
Let your voice be heard.
Just stand and say, we don't want this.
yes.
This is what we want.
This is what we want. And I've put together a formula and a structure where Bahamians can maximize the benefits in terms of the proceeds from those carbon credits at the tune of 95%. That's significant. But there's a structure that you could put in place with the government where there's proper oversight, where every year, and Bahamians, I guess, would look forward to the printing of that gazette where you have the numbers come out about the amount of carbon credits and the intended sale and what the numbers are.
Because they could bank on that
They
money.
can bank on that money.
They could bank on that money.
But a formula where all of these things are gazetted, and you have transactions coming from verifiable sources that can tell you, hey, you can validate this
Yes, because whatever's in the Gazette, you'll be able to go to Google
and validate
and validate that
whatever took
information.
place.
Yes.
So the transparency in terms of the information, I think with, which you're talking about the assets of the Bahamian people, that should never ever be a secret.
I agree.
Totally,
1,000%.
totally agree.
And anything, any type of structure that you set up that is designed to create secrecy around $156 billion
Mm-hmm.
that belongs to the citizens of this country.
Can't be called nothing else but fraud, man. This, as you say, is the crime or the heist of the century. You're getting robbed without a gun. It's the heist.
But like I said, are we going to allow this to take place? That's the question.
And that's the conversation that we will continue to be having, because as I said, this has to be
Yes,
more than
absolutely.
one segment for us to delve into what is necessary. But I need you guys to follow Ricardo Thurston on all social media platforms, okay, and get this information, all right? And I know the brother is going to be doing a whole lot more in reference to this. Look up the sovereign wealth funds, okay? Look up the 42,000, 50,000, whatever the number is going to be, all right? But we will be continuing this conversation, all right, because it's a must.
And it's like what you said earlier. A lot of people aren't even making $40,000 a year. And
Vast majority of Bahamians ain't
you,
making that.
if you come out to a protest march, maybe 4 hours of your time for $40,000,
Serious thing. 4 hours of your time.
$10,000 an hour.
Listen, for that now that's a serious thing, because then if you're looking at that count, some people don't make that in 2 years, some people don't make that in 3. So you're saying to me that you have a problem with making 2 years salary for 4 hours?
But not only that,
Sign me up.
Even if you're making, let's say, over $100,000 a year, you still ain't making $10,000 an hour.
No.
So
Still a win.
it's a good deal.
And at the end of the day, even if you're making 100 grand, what's better than money than more money?
More money.
More
More.
money.
Yeah. And it's not only more money, it's your money.
Exactly.
It's
Well,
it's your money that somebody is taking away from you.
what J.G. Wentworth says, it's my money and they want it now. I want it
That's
now.
the slogan. You want it now.
Want it now. All right, gentlemen. So as we wrap up this first segment, let's get final thoughts. Start with Mr. Johnson. You haven't had an opportunity to put in too much, so let's get your final thoughts, and we'll have Mr. Thurston.
Well, I just want us as Bahamians to wake up, and the government can say to us, we gave you all every reason, we gave you every chance to see the numbers, to look at it, because they are putting this in our faces, but we're not paying attention. It's there, the gazettes are there. Even most recently, a conference is going to be held on the 19th of this month in reference to the climate change, the climate financing, and how we're going to monetize this whole event by CFAL. It's published. It's there. Bahamians, let's wake up. It belongs to you. It belongs to me. It belongs to our children, our grandchildren. And I'm not going to allow them to steal it from me.
I think when you look at the history of the Bahamas, there are critical events that happens within the course of a nation where you have a forging of citizenship, meaning that you have to do something substantive in order to fight for that citizenship. And there needs to be a vesting of citizenship. What that means is that there are certain benefits that should be inured to Bahamians, that those benefits aren't shared with anybody else. A foreigner shouldn't be able to participate in your economy the way you participate in your economy.
Yes.
The red carpet should be rolled out for you as a citizen.
Should.
So we've reached the point And I think it's a generational nexus where a new generation need to emerge that can determine where we want this country to go going forward.
Yes.
Now, it's not an individual race, it's a relay.
Mm-hmm.
I think our past generations have done, especially the pre-independent generation, has done this country a disservice by not building this country for the next generation and being willing to pass that baton on to the next generation. So we find ourselves as that generation that's on the precipice. We have to yuck that baton out of the hand
Yes.
of that other generation.
Yes.
That is a sad indictment
Indictment.
about where we are.
Yeah.
Because if we're waiting for them to pass that baton,
It ain't
that's
coming.
not going to happen.
No.
And we're going to become frustrated. And we're going to end up holding the baton too long and not passing it on to the next generation. So you have this constant degradation of how a society and a country is to be built. We are at that stage where we can make a lot of corrections. If we can get this right, set up a proper formula, pass it on to the next generation, and build the Bahamas that can participate in that global community and have the right for self-determination in terms of how we engage. That's what we're looking at in terms of how do you build a country, and how do you build a country with citizens that are black people. So these are very serious times,
Yes,
and
they
our
are.
generation has to make the sacrifice for the next.
Yep.
I agree. I agree with what's been said by both. What the listening audience needs to understand is that with this kind of money, you can be Dubai. For those who just want to go on Google and look up Dubai, if you've never seen it, you've never heard about it, just look up Dubai. Look where they started. Check their history. Look where they started and where they are now. We have the potential to be that, to be kings and queens, emperors and empresses in our own country. All you got to do is take the bull by the horn and say, listen, man, this is what's happening. We stand here. We might have stood on some other stuff, but we got to stand on this one here. All right, so I want, as I said, I want you to pay attention. Anytime you see carbon credits in the title, climate change, carbon credits, pay attention. Okay, that's on this platform and any platform. All right, any training session, any government meeting. Okay, educate yourself. All right, so that when the time comes for you to answer that call, you know why you're answering that call. You know what you're standing for. All right, so tune in next week 7 p.m. for another episode of Let's Talk. I'll be with President Ruckus Mann speaking on the Manosphere. And